"Get her out of sight. That black maid doesn't belong anywhere near Mr. Lee." The words hissed through the polished air of the Wellington Grand Hotel, sharper than the crystal chandeliers that glittered overhead. The marble floor reflected. Every beam of light, every hurried step of staff rehearsing their smiles. Mr. Harrison, the hotel's general manager, adjusted his tie with a trembling hand as he barked into his lapel mic, desperate to maintain the illusion of perfection. The stakes were everything tonight. 2 massive glass doors parted, and the lobby froze in collective breath. Mr. Li Wenhao, the Chinese millionaire investor whose portfolio spanned skyscrapers from Shanghai to San Francisco, stepped onto the marble with the precision of a man used to commanding rooms. 6 associates flanked him, their dark suits gleaming under the chandeliers, their conversation a rapid-fire exchange in Mandarin. The musical tones filled the lobby like a language of power, one Harrison couldn't understand, let alone control. "Welcome, welcome," Harrison stammered, thrusting out his hand, his rehearsed grin stretched too wide. Mr. Lee offered a curt nod, continuing in Mandarin as his entourage took in the scene with sharp, appraising eyes. Panic flickered in Harrison's chest. He yanked his smartphone from his pocket, opening the translation app he'd trusted far too much. He lifted it to his lips, praying for salvation. "Could you repeat that?" he asked, voice wobbling as Mr. Lee gestured toward the architecture. The app buzzed, processed, then spoke in its robotic monotone. "Chicken Moon Hotel Tax." The associates' faces twitched, one smothering a laugh, another exchanging a glance of disbelief. Mr. Lee's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. Harrison's throat went dry. He tried again, slower, but the app mangled the response into important money tree law, mooncake problem. The absurdity hung in the air like a bad joke. Beads of sweat broke across his forehead, dripping into the collar of his starched shirt. The chandelier's brilliance only seemed to spotlight his humiliation. Across the lobby, unnoticed by the powerful, a maid in a gray uniform pushed her cleaning cart quietly along the marble. Olivia Thomas moved with practiced invisibility, her eyes lowered, her presence absorbed into the background as ordered. She'd heard Harrison's hiss earlier, "Get her out of sight," and obeyed like she always did. But as her cartwheels hummed, against the floor, her ears caught every word of the Mandarin conversation, every nuance the translation app butchered. Her hands stilled for a moment, resting against the handle of the cart, before she moved on as though nothing stirred inside her. No one knew about the diplomas folded away in her tiny apartment. No one knew the years she had spent in Beijing. Lecture halls mastering the language now being twisted into nonsense. No one knew that the maid they tried to erase was, in truth, more prepared for this moment than the man in the $1,000 suit fumbling with his phone. No one in that marble hall knew that the woman they dismissed would, in a matter of hours, rewrite everything. Olivia Thomas was 32 years old, though her weary eyes often looked older. Raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a nurse, Olivia had grown up understanding the weight of sacrifice. Her mother used to come home with tired hands and a tired smile, reminding her daughter each night that education was the only bridge out of struggle. Olivia believed her. She became the first in her family to graduate college, clutching her diploma not just as a personal triumph but as proof that her mother's long nights and empty bank account had meant something. She had done more than just graduate. Through sheer determination, she earned a scholarship that carried her across the world. A bachelor's degree in international relations led her to a master's in East Asian linguistics at Beijing University, an achievement few from her neighborhood would have even dreamed possible. Fluent in Mandarin and Cantonese, conversant in Japanese, Olivia had once imagined a life working in diplomacy, bridging cultures, representing her country in global conversations. She had spent nights in Beijing's libraries poring over trade policy, days practicing Mandarin tonal precision with her professors, weekends absorbing the culture in markets and tea houses. When she returned to the United States, she came back with more than knowledge. She came back with hope. She believed the world would see her for what she was, a bridge between East and West, a woman capable of navigating the spaces where misunderstanding could cost millions. She applied everywhere: international firms, government agencies, corporations, boasting of their global reach. Over 200 applications, dozens of interviews. But time after time, the letters came back polite but cold. We regret to inform you. Behind closed doors, hiring managers wondered why her resume showed a black woman from a working-class neighborhood attached to elite Chinese universities. Some smiled condescendingly, praising her unique story, while offering nothing, more than vague encouragement. Others looked at her as if she had wandered into a room she didn't belong in. The rejection didn't just wound her, it exhausted her. Student loans didn't care about unique stories. Rent didn't pause for bias. So Olivia took the job she could get, not the one she had earned. She pushed a cleaning cart through the halls of luxury hotels, polishing mirrors and scrubbing floors for executives who would never know she had once written research papers on the very markets they were trying to enter. She wore the uniform that made her invisible, her name reduced to a tag pinned to her chest. At night, in her small apartment, she'd sit beneath her framed diplomas, both a comfort and a curse. They reminded her she was more than what the world chose to see. They also reminded her of how easily brilliance could be overlooked when packaged in skin, and circumstances the powerful didn't value. Yet, through it all, Olivia carried her grandmother's words like a shield. Dignity doesn't need a title. It only needs courage. Mr. Harrison, the general manager of the Wellington Grand, could not have been more different. Obsessed with image, addicted to control, Harrison believed success was built not on substance, but on optics. He measured worth in polished shoes, silk ties, and perfect smiles rehearsed in mirrors. His staff were not people to him. They were scenery, props in the grand theater of luxury. He prided himself on making them invisible. Maids, bellboys, waiters, each reduced to silence and obedience so guests would never notice the labor holding up the illusion. To Harrison, Olivia was no different from the polished marble she mopped, or the fresh flowers she arranged. Necessary, but unworthy of attention. That blindness was his greatest weakness, because the man arriving that afternoon, Mr. Li Wenhao, was not impressed by marble or chandeliers. A self-made millionaire who had built his real estate empire from the ground up in Shanghai, Mr. Li valued something far rarer in the circles of wealth: respect. In his world, money bought buildings, but it did not buy integrity. He expected those who dealt with him to communicate in his language, not just Mandarin words, but the cultural fluency that revealed true understanding. He did not demand perfection, but he demanded sincerity. And that was the fatal contrast set into motion inside Wellington's glittering lobby. Harrison stood ready to impress with rehearsed smiles, English-only speeches, and a smartphone translation app he considered good enough. Olivia stood in the shadows, her brilliance wrapped in gray polyester, capable of speaking the very language Mr. Li expected to hear. One embodied arrogance polished into pretense. The other carried dignity disguised as invisibility. And in the hours ahead, when misunderstanding threatened millions, it would not be chandeliers, marble, or apps that saved Wellington. It would be the quiet courage of a maid no one thought belonged in the room. Perfection, Harrison announced, striding across the staff break room like a general about to send his troops to war, means no one sees you, no one hears you. The guests should step into this hotel and believe the world just magically runs itself. His voice carried the practiced authority of a man who had built his career on intimidation. The staff stood stiffly, lined against the wall in their uniforms. Crisp white jackets for the waiters, tailored suits for the front desk, and gray polyester for the maids. His gaze lingered on them one by one, but when it passed over Olivia Thomas, it did not pause. To him, she was simply another shadow. "Remember," Harrison continued, tugging on his tie until it sat razor-straight against his shirt collar, "Mr. Li's visit is worth more than all of your salaries combined. He doesn't come here for mistakes, he comes here for perfection, so be invisible." The irony sank deep into Olivia's bones. She had spent years being invisible. Her talents, her degrees, her fluency in languages hidden behind the uniform she wore, and yet here he was, demanding invisibility as if it were a skill, not a survival mechanism she had already mastered. She lowered her eyes and said nothing, her grandmother's words echoing softly in her memory. Dignity doesn't need a title. It only needs courage. An hour later, the grand performance began. Wellington's marble lobby gleamed as if it had been polished with liquid light. Fresh orchids lined the entryway, their petals still damp from misting. A soft string quartet played from the mezzanine, the sound carefully engineered to drift down like an expensive fragrance. And then, right on time, the glass doors opened. Mr. Li Wenhao entered with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to power. His 6 associates flanked him, carrying sleek leather portfolios, their Mandarin conversation filling the air like music no one in the room understood. Harrison stepped forward with his practiced smile, arms open as if he were welcoming royalty. "Welcome, Mr. Li. We are honored to host you." Mr. Li returned only a polite nod before gesturing toward the soaring ceilings and speaking rapidly. In Mandarin, his tone was inquisitive, measured, and direct. Harrison froze, the translation app already in his hand. He lifted it to his lips like a lifeline. "Could you repeat that?" he asked, voice too cheerful. Mr. Li obliged, his Mandarin smooth and fast. The app buzzed, blinked, and then spat out, "Chicken Moon Hotel Tax." For a moment, the associates looked at one another, lips twitching. One covered his mouth discreetly, another raised an eyebrow. Their amusement was stifled but unmistakable. Harrison laughed nervously. Yes, of course. Taxes. Very important." Mr. Li frowned. He asked another question, this one sharper, layered with financial jargon. Harrison pressed the app again. The phone's robotic voice announced, "Important money tree law, moon cake problem." The words hung in the air like an insult. This time, one associate did not bother hiding his chuckle. Mr. Li's face remained impassive, but the silence around him was louder than laughter. His fingers tapped against his briefcase in restrained irritation, standing just beyond the archway. With her cleaning cart, Olivia froze. She had been polishing the brass railing, her motions automatic, but her ears caught every syllable. She knew exactly what Mr. Li had asked about, new zoning regulations and their implications for hospitality investments. She had read the municipal updates just last week during her break, and she knew exactly what Harrison had failed to understand. Her lips parted slightly, a response forming instinctively in her mind. In Mandarin, she could have explained it clearly, with detail, in the same cadence Mr. Li was used to hearing. But she stopped herself, swallowing the words before they left. Her tongue. Memories stung. A hotel manager at her last job scolding her after she'd helped a group of Japanese tourists in their language. "Stay in your lane," he had said coldly. Guests get uncomfortable when staff act too educated. That reprimand had cost her shifts, nearly cost her job. She had learned the hard way that stepping out of invisibility came with punishment. So she stayed silent, her cloth still gliding over brass while inside the conference room, the opportunity crumbled. The tour continued. Mr. Li asked about the ballroom's capacity for hybrid international conferences. Harrison gestured to the chandelier and boasted about the number of Swarovski crystals in its design. He asked about foreign investment tax structures. Harrison dodged with vague promises to circle back. Each mistranslation compounded the embarrassment. Associates checked their watches. 2 whispered to each other, one shaking his head, in disbelief. Olivia lingered at the edge of the lobby, dusting the same spotless surface again and again. She could feel the tension bleeding through the walls. Her heart thudded. She was watching $1 million opportunity slip through their fingers, not because Wellington lacked beauty, but because it lacked respect. Harrison's face shone with sweat now, his perfect tie suffocating him. He muttered frantically into his phone, trying new apps, none of them catching the nuance of the Mandarin phrases. Every failure was a blow to his authority, every chuckle from the associates. Another fracture in the illusion of control he guarded so jealously. And Olivia understood all of it. She understood Mr. Li's frustration at wasted time, the impatience in the associates' clipped responses, the cultural signals embedded in their expressions. She understood it all, but she remained silent, a ghost among chandeliers. In the hallway, one of her co-workers brushed past with a tray of champagne glasses. He glanced at her, saw the clenched jaw, the way her eyes followed the muffled Mandarin conversation. He knew. "You could save him," the co-worker whispered under his breath as he passed. "But at what cost to yourself?" Olivia's cloth stilled against the brass. Her pulse hammered. Her eyes flicked toward the conference room doors, then back to her cart. Her grandmother's words tugged at her memory again. Dignity doesn't need a title. It only takes courage. And still, she stayed silent. For now, because she knew the moment she spoke would change everything, either for her ruin or her redemption. The pressure inside the Wellington Grand's executive boardroom was suffocating. Mr. Li Wenhao, the Chinese millionaire investor, leaned, back in his leather chair, his sharp eyes scanning the table. Around him, 6 associates scribbled notes in Mandarin, their murmurs a steady undertone. The question he had just asked, about new municipal zoning codes for mixed-use towers, was precise, technical, and pivotal. At the head of the table, Manager Harrison forced a smile so tight it looked like pain. He lifted his phone, desperate. The translation app chirped, spun, and finally declared, "Chicken Moon Hotel Tax. Money tree problem." The words echoed like nonsense in the hushed room. A few of Lee's associates stifled chuckles. One didn't bother, letting a low laugh. Escape. The sound was sharp, cruel. Harrison's face burned red. His tie felt like a noose. He tried again, speaking more slowly as though scolding a child. "Could you repeat that about zoning allowances?" The app hesitated and spat out, "Important mooncake policy. Foreign money tree law now." This time, the laughter wasn't hidden. It rippled across the table. Mr. Li didn't laugh. He set his pen down with a deliberate click. A small sound, but it hit Harrison like a gavel striking judgment. In the hallway, Olivia Thomas froze. She was dusting a molding she'd already dusted twice, a tactic to linger near the door. She understood every syllable of Mr. Li's Mandarin. She caught every layer of his tone, his probing question disguised as polite inquiry, his growing disappointment in the hotel's preparedness. Her heart raced. She'd been here before, on the edge of stepping forward, on the edge of revealing herself, but the memory of a past reprimand stung. "Stay in your lane, Olivia. Guests don't like the help acting smarter than them." Then, her grandmother's words rose from memory, clear as a bell. "Dignity doesn't need a title, Olivia. It only takes courage." Her hand dropped from the cart. She stepped through the door. "Respected Mr. Li," she said, in flawless Mandarin, her voice steady, clear. "If I may clarify your question about the vertical zoning allowances and mixed-use overlays." The room froze. Every head turned toward the doorway. Associates blinked. Pens stopped mid-stroke. Harrison whipped around, his face twisting from confusion to fury. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed. "This is a private." But Mr. Li raised his hand. Just a gesture, but absolute. He didn't look at Harrison. His gaze was fixed on Olivia. Switching to Mandarin, his voice sharpened with intent. "If the city's overlay district permits vertical integration, how would you calculate FAR with the recessed podium? What of curb-cut restrictions? Do they cripple retail viability beneath the hotel tower?" It was a test, a gauntlet. Olivia met his eyes without flinching. "The FAR is maximized through the tower portion," she replied, smoothly, still in Mandarin. "Last quarter's amendments exclude podium retail from the ratio if it provides community access. Curb cuts along the corridor are restricted, yes, but exemptions exist for shared loading zones under time-restricted ingress." The words were exact, confident, no hesitation. One associate leaned forward, scribbling notes. Another raised his brows in approval. Mr. Li's eyes narrowed, intrigued now. He threw another curveball, using a proverb thick with cultural nuance. "We do not partner on Pai Nao Dai Gong Ching. Slap the forehead projects." Of course not, Olivia said instantly. You're asking whether the city's policy is a slogan or a system. Here, it is a system, codified, enforceable. The abatements are tied to measurable cultural exchange. She paused, letting the moment breathe. That's the difference between a building that looks impressive and a project that performs. A ripple passed among the associates. Several nodded. The room was shifting. Harrison stood frozen, clutching his useless presentation remote like a lifeline. Mr. Lee asked another question, faster this time, in a Shanghai dialect variation. If we secure air rights across the alley, can they be banked under the new TDR? Or are we left with Junyu Yimao, drops in the ocean? Olivia answered without pause. The new TDR permits cross-alley banking when parcels share a community benefit plan. Far from drops in the ocean, it unlocks 5% additional FAR, if paired with ground-floor cultural programming. This time, an associate set a small recorder on the table, capturing every word. Harrison's deck still glowed on the wall, unused, irrelevant. And payments? One investor interjected. Our tenants demand WeChat Pay and Alipay. Will your systems talk to ours, or will you fumble with apps like this? He gestured disdainfully at Harrison's phone. Olivia allowed the faintest smile. You'll integrate gateways for both, with U.S.-compliant AML controls. Seamless for the guest. Invisible compliance for you. This model already works in West Coast markets. We replicate it here. Another nod. More notes. Finally, Mr. Lee asked the question everyone else was thinking. Switching to English so the insult couldn't be softened, he said, "Why is someone of your education cleaning rooms?" Olivia's reply was measured, her voice neither bitter nor pleading. "Because opportunity has been blind to me," she said softly. "But knowledge is never wasted." The line landed with weight. The silence that followed was thicker than velvet. One associate leaned back and murmured in Mandarin, "She has more vision than the manager." Mr. Lee nodded slightly. Then, with deliberate clarity, he addressed Harrison. "Your hotel nearly lost this deal, not from lack of marble or chandeliers, but from lack of vision." Harrison's face was drained of color. He opened his mouth, stammered, but the moment was gone. Mr. Lee turned back to Olivia, this time with the authority of a decision-maker. "If we proceed, we require a bilingual liaison, someone who holds both systems in their head. Do you know anyone?" Harrison seized on the lifeline. "We'll conduct a global search. Hire an expert." Mr. Lee cut him off with a glance. "No need. I've already found her." The shift was complete. The deal, once dangling by a thread, was now anchored, but anchored to her. Olivia stepped forward as Mr. Lee gestured to the empty chair at his side. She sat, gray uniform and all, her hands steady on the polished table. She outlined a phased plan in Mandarin. Phase 1, integrated payments and tea service. Phase 2, multi-generational suites with seamless adjoining doors. Phase 3, community programming to unlock dual abatements. Phase 4, tower expansion once metrics warranted. Every investor leaned forward, listening, nodding, scribbling. For the first time that afternoon, Mr. Lee smiled. He rose, extending his personal black and gold business card. "In my company," he said, "we call this seeing. You have helped me see." Olivia accepted with both hands as she'd been taught. "Thank you," she said. Then, because courage had already carried her this far, she added, "Perhaps Wellington could begin seeing its own people, too." The chandelier glittered above, cold and unblinking, but in that boardroom, the balance of power had shifted forever. The conference room that had felt suffocating minutes earlier now hummed with a strange, new energy. Papers shuffled, pens scratched across notebooks, and the once skeptical associates leaned in toward Olivia rather than Harrison. The shift was undeniable. Mr. Lee tapped his fingers lightly on the polished oak table, the rhythm deliberate, thoughtful. Then, in English this time, he spoke so there could be no misunderstanding. "Wellington will have our investment," he said. The relief that washed across Harrison's face was visible, but short-lived. Mr. Lee's gaze sharpened, turning the air heavy again. "But it will be on one condition. She," he nodded toward Olivia, "must be included in all future strategy. Meetings. Non-negotiable." The words hit like a hammer. Harrison opened his mouth, but his throat betrayed him, the protest dying before it could form. He saw the looks on the associates' faces, the unmistakable authority in Lee's tone. To resist would be to end the deal entirely. His chest tightened as he forced himself to nod. "Of course, Mr. Lee. Absolutely. We value Miss Thomas's contributions greatly." The lie rang hollow, and everyone knew it. When the meeting adjourned, the executives filed out with quick steps, whispers buzzing. Harrison remained seated, his posture sagging as though the weight of 20 years in hospitality had suddenly collapsed onto his shoulders. Just outside the room, 2 board members caught him before he could flee. "Blindness, Harrison." One said sharply, "You've spent years preaching perfection, but you couldn't even see the talent working under your nose." The other's voice was colder. "Do you realize how close you came to losing everything? Your obsession with optics nearly cost us millions. Don't expect that corporate promotion to materialize. Consider yourself fortunate if you keep this hotel." Harrison's face burned. He tried to reply, but the men had already walked away, their words hanging like a verdict in the air. His dream of rising to corporate headquarters, of finally being more than a manager, had crumbled into dust. Meanwhile, Olivia lingered at the edge of the boardroom, her hands still folded neatly. Before her, she had not asked for recognition, yet it had found her. Mr. Lee approached, his associates following like shadows. He extended a sleek black and gold business card, the same one he gave only to personal contacts. "My company needs minds like yours," he said, his tone warm but resolute. "If your hotel refuses to value you, I will. You belong in boardrooms, not corridors." Olivia accepted the card with both hands, bowing her head slightly in respect. "Thank you, Mr. Lee." Her voice wavered, not from fear, but from the dizzying realization that after years of invisibility, she was finally being seen. That evening, she stepped out into the cool city air, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her fingers hovered over her mother's number before pressing call. The familiar voice answered, weary but strong. "Baby, everything is all right?" Olivia swallowed hard. "Mama, today, for once I wasn't invisible. They finally saw me." There was a pause, then the sound of her mother's smile, soft but proud. "Oh, Livy, I always saw you. The world was just slow to catch up." Tears burned at the corners of Olivia's eyes as her mother's words wrapped around her like a blanket. "Baby," her mother continued, voice firm with pride, "you didn't just translate words today. You translated dignity. You showed them that respect is a language of its own, and you spoke it better than any app or manager ever could." Olivia closed her eyes, breathing deeply. For the first time in years, the weight on her chest lifted. The echoes of rejection letters, the sting of being overlooked, the exhaustion of scrubbing floors with diplomas hanging over her bed, all of it felt lighter. She had stepped into the light, and no one could erase her again. Behind her, the grand chandelier of Wellington glittered against the night sky. But Olivia knew the real brilliance wasn't in crystal or marble. It was in a truth her grandmother had whispered long ago and her mother had just confirmed. Dignity never needed a title. It only needed courage, and today, courage had spoken. The Wellington Grand Hotel looked different a month later, not in its marble, its chandeliers, or its polished glass, but in its spirit. At the center of the transformation stood Olivia Thomas. Gone was the gray housekeeping uniform. In its place, a tailored navy suit, her badge gleaming with a new title, Director of International Guest Relations. Her first week in the role, she sat at the long mahogany boardroom table where she once had been invisible, speaking with clarity and confidence. And the room listened. What began as an emergency translation had become a permanent seat at the table, but Olivia did not stop there. With Mr. Lee's encouragement, she proposed the Hidden Talents Initiative, a groundbreaking program designed to uncover the untapped skills of hotel staff. Within weeks, employees across departments revealed hidden degrees, second languages, and technical skills. A maintenance worker turned out to be a certified architect. A concierge assistant spoke fluent Russian. A line cook had a master's in hospitality management. Harrison had dismissed them all as labor. Olivia revealed them as assets. Mr. Lai remained more than an investor. He became Olivia's mentor, inviting her to strategy meetings far beyond Wellington. He often reminded her, respect is the first step of any negotiation. The two developed not just a professional bond but the seeds of a lifelong friendship, one built on trust, equality, and a shared belief in dignity. Some whispered that perhaps it was something deeper. Olivia only smiled. Harrison, meanwhile, could not escape the shadow of his failure. The board stripped him of his authority, demoting him to a smaller regional post. His once pristine reputation was reduced to a cautionary tale. The man who nearly cost millions. Because he could not see beyond a uniform. The staff whispered about him with pity, not fear. His name became a case study in arrogance. Then the story went public. A guest's discreet phone recording of that fateful day, Harrison fumbling with his translation app, Olivia stepping forward with flawless Mandarin, hit the internet. Within days, it went viral. Millions watched, shared, and commented. The hashtag #respect speaks all languages trended across platforms. Commenters called Olivia an icon, a modern-day reminder that brilliance often hides in plain sight. For Olivia, the virality mattered less than the quiet victories. Paying off a student loan, watching her mother beam with pride, seeing colleagues stand taller as their hidden talents were acknowledged. Wellington was no longer just a hotel. It had become a stage for dignity, and Olivia Thomas had rewritten the script. A millionaire didn't choose marble floors or golden chandeliers. He didn't choose the polished smile of a manager rehearsing lines into a mirror. He chose respect. And in that choice, he revealed the truth. The maid they tried to erase was the very voice that saved everything. Olivia's story is not just about a hotel deal or a viral video. It is about the invisible brilliance hidden behind uniforms, the untold stories waiting in silence, and the courage it takes to step forward when dignity demands it. Because true intelligence is not in the language of business, but in the humility to listen. True wealth is not in billions earned, but in the respect freely given. And true failure, true bankruptcy of the soul, is arrogance that blinds itself to human worth. Olivia translated more than Mandarin that day. She translated humanity, dignity, and power in its purest form. If this story moved you, subscribe for more stories of Black excellence, social justice, and dignity that rewrites power. Because sometimes the greatest revolutions don't begin in boardrooms. They begin with the courage of those the world tried not to see.